So Ms. Dana Kamush is a senior career readiness, senior manager and career readiness at the Houston Independent School District. The Houston Independent School District is the largest district in Texas, and the 7th in the nation. Dana oversees special projects in the district relative to workforce and career readiness. She is an educator with 21 years experience. She has served as a career and technical education instructor, an assistant principal and adjunct professor for 8 years at Houston Community College, and she is currently the district administrator. Thank you so much for taking your time to share with us all your valuable knowledge. We're really excited. I heard you talk about this topic and you were passionate about it, and I said, okay, she has to speak. So thank you so much for accepting to speak. Over to you.
Oh, thank you, Ruth. Okay, so do I have control or
you project? You should have control.
Okay, let's share screen. Okay. Let's go here. Okay, so thank you again, Ruth and Jennifer, Dr. Hamilton, Dr. Smino, for having me with this forum. Greetings to everybody. I won't be before you long. So I'm just going to give you a 30,000-foot view of some of the things that we have going on in HISD post the pandemic. Like everybody else, we had to pivot in the pandemic, and it required some reimagining of education the way we knew it. And so I titled this one Reimagine Education, just to give you some ideas. I do have resources at the end, and I'll put my information in the chat. Feel free to contact me if you have any questions about anything I shared, or you want to run some things by me based on some of the things that we're doing, and let's find a shared solution to the problems. So with that being said, I am Dana Carmouche. You can see my credentials. I'm not big on the title. I do oversee a large portion of what we do in HISD. So we're about 210,000 students. Relative to career and technical education, my department oversees the gamut. So I have K through 12, it encompasses the entire system of education within HISD. And so the first thing I want to kind of highlight is the middle skills gap and the opportunity gap. So when the pandemic came down, one of the big things we had, or the bigger discussions we had with our business partners and industry partners, the city of Houston, the workforce solutions workers who provide us with data to determine what the next 10 or 20 years will look like in the workforce. Because when we get ready to create what we call programs of study in HISD, we have to take into account what does the industry there and what does the Gulf Coast region look like, because most of our students don't leave a certain mile radius. And so we want to ensure that when they leave us, if they go on to a post-secondary institution, or if they choose to go directly into the workforce, that they have a job, number one, and that it has longevity. And so when we begin to talk about the middle skills gap, I know Harvard has a study already that they've been looking at for the middle skills gap, and there are other Ivy League institutions who have been tracking this relative to the US. And so for Texas, the middle skills gap actually accounts for 56% of our labor market. And so that gap means that, but only 42 of the workers are trained, meaning that when they leave high school, that they have the skill set to enter into the workforce. And so that became a problem. When I meet with my Exxon Mobils and my Shells, and obviously Houston is a hub for the medical center as well as oil and gas. So that's where we sit, in hospitality and tourism are those big ones for us. And so this problem just didn't impact one industry. It actually impacted all of our industries across the board. And so when we had different Google coming in, Amazon is in our backyard now, Tesla just went to Waco. So all of these dynamics are taking place right now, and we're having to scramble to ensure that we're able to provide the necessary tools and skills for students to be successful post-graduation. And so going into a virtual setting, that's very challenging when we're talking about career and technical education, because our department is very hands-on. That's your welders, that's your construction technology, that's the HVAC, the people who do the piping and air conditions for you, and all of those kinds of things that you don't take a second guess to contemplate. Do they have a degree, or can they just fix my air condition because I'm hot, or can they put windows on my house for me, or whatever that is. So those hands-on middle skills is where we're seeing an erosion because of baby boomers retiring. And so a study of the US economy showed that the middle skills gap could jeopardize about 450 billion of our economic impact. And so that's 2.5 trillion over a full decade. And so this study, the decade will be 2030. So by 2030, if we don't get a handle on how we're preparing the next generation to take these positions, we're going to find ourselves in a bind because we won't be able to compete globally. And so that's not just happening in America, that's happening across the board. But relative to that, I think a lot of people get stuck with the middle skills gap, and then they forget about the opportunity gap. I mean, so the middle skills gap is one piece, but it goes in tandem with the opportunity gap. And so if you ignore the social dynamics of intersectionality, when we're talking about race and class and age and gender, all of those things matter. And so my dissertation is going to look at how do these intersect and impact how we place students in programs of study. Do we place more males in STEM related courses relative to females? And do we do, and where do girls of color fall into all of that, or indigenous, or, Black, all of that. And so excluding that, if you're not intentional about inclusion, then you're intentional about exclusion. And so we had to consider all of those dynamics, and we started pulling data. I had Schlumberger reach out to me about 2 months ago, and they had a grant that they needed to get to give us. They already had the grant. So, sometimes that's how that works. They'll call you directly for the grant. And they wanted to give us some money, and they needed some data. And when I started pulling the data to determine how many girls we had in STEM classes, how many we had in computer science, the data was staggering, which caused me to say, let me look at where we were when we had No Child Left Behind, which was the legislative policy that governed us when President Bush took office, and then where we are right now with ESA, the last legislation that President Barack Obama signed into law. And so what does that look like? So here's a quick look at what HISD looks like for career readiness. So we do have 47 high schools, as stated. My department my specific division oversees all of these. So my team supports all of the teachers that we have in the district relative to career and technical education. This is just CTE. We have 13 career clusters. So we try to align with the federal government, which has 16. We combine some of them in Texas to make 13. We support all of the programs of study across the district, which are 157 different programs at 47 high schools. So we have 30 middle schools. My team supports all of the middle schools. And when I say those 30, we have more than 30, but only 30 provide career and technical education courses. And then we have 28 dual credit certification programs, which means we partner with post-secondary institutions to provide what we call level 1 certificates, meaning that those students who are in welding or in HVAC or any of those middle skills kind of opportunities, health science, they can obtain a level 1 certificate and go directly into industry. So they can obtain that while they're in high school, walk away with an associate's degree or level 1 certificate in high school. They get that prior to graduation. So our journey to career readiness. And so this is all encompassing. It's not, you don't wait until they get to high school to start thinking about their career journey. So we start as early as elementary school. We intertwine middle school. We're expanding the middle school options and definitely high school across the board, because the state of Texas requires accountability at that level for us. And therefore, we make sure that we provide the opportunity to students to either obtain a certification or employment post-graduation. And then we partner with those post-secondary institutions if it requires the students to go on beyond a level 1 certificate to obtain an associate's degree, or if they want to go into college. We make sure that we set the stage and give them every opportunity possible. It wasn't easy in the pandemic doing a lot of it virtually. So we had to go to some hybrid models for those that were very hands-on, like our masonry, some of our agriculture. They had to come to the school because they had to raise their cattle, and if they were doing a greenhouse or anything like that, to check in. So there were certain programs of study that required students to come to class. And so we had to figure out, how do we make it safe for students to come on which day so that they're able to access the tools that they needed to access at that time. So what was the power of partnership? I think that's very important. If you have not established a partnership, we cannot do the work that we do collaboratively without it. One of our main ones, the newest pilot that we have happens to be with Texas Health and Human Services. So this department actually oversees all of the benefits for eligibility for the entire state of Texas. And so they came knocking. Right now, the USDA is underwriting this program, and they're looking to pilot it across America. And so this programs allows students, the intent was to deal with generational and situational poverty. So this division of Texas Health and Human Services actually is the one that provides food stamps and things of that nature for families impacted for whatever reason. And so they wanted to start impacting generational and situational poverty. So they came to us to provide an opportunity where we have seniors who will be graduating seniors this year. They had a year-long pilot, and upon graduation, they're extended an opportunity to work in some of the local offices here in the greater Houston area, starting them out with a salary of $29,000 plus benefits. So it rounds out to about $31,000 that grad students will be able. So these are guaranteed positions. We have 60 of them. So we piloted at 3 of our high schools. The requirement had to be that those students were receiving what we call TANF or those kinds of welfare type services from Texas Health and Human Services. So we targeted those demographics where that was high, meaning those were typically in low income areas. They had challenges at the school. The SES was high in that area. The infrastructure was challenged. So those were the 3 high schools in our area that we targeted to provide this opportunity. Again, we can't do the work we do without the partners. And so one of my job responsibilities is to increase our partnership. So we have about 160 partners that we have deep to go with all of our programs of study to make sure that students have an opportunity throughout the 4 years of high school. Upon graduating from high school, they would have had an internship and an externship, and we create a pipeline. So one of the conversations that I have with the city of Houston regularly is to make sure that these companies are at the table and we're having a conversation, because their request is that these students are prepared. Our request is that there's a pipeline that's created. And that way they begin to, I think, nurture their next group of talent that's coming in, and that saves on us. And so this becomes homegrown, and it requires a buy-in. And so we've been blessed to have that. Performance in a pandemic, we had to still provide that teacher support because we are 3-pronged. And so what does that look like? So some of the things I had my team to start was called the Click and Chat series. And so that Click and Chat series was a virtual series that I had my business partners come in and provide those opportunities, because upskilling is very important. Teachers probably haven't been in industry. So in order to be a career in technical education teacher, instructor, you had to have had at least 3 years in industry. I came out of oil and gas. So before I went into education, I was in the oil and gas industry. So to become a career in technical education instructor, you must have industry experience. You can't just have academic experience. And so I have the partners come in and provide those tools, because if a teacher has been in the classroom 5 to 10 years, then their skill set may be outdated. They need upskilling. And so this Click and Chat series allowed that to take place, to provide those tools to teachers so that they can in turn provide those opportunities to students. And so some of the resources that we use, if you don't have a budget like we have, so obviously HISD has a $2 billion budget. We're getting 900 million right now from the federal government. And so how's that money going to be used? Our budget in CT alone is about 60 million. That covers salaries, that covers infrastructure and things of that nature that we do for the campuses. Some of the free tools that we use are Google Drive, and I have links at the end so you can go and look at everything that we have on our websites and everything that we access and provide to parents and students. Obviously, we have YouTube channels, so making sure we stay relevant to what the students are looking at. Instagram, we do have Instagram and all of those to communicate. We have a funnel system where we have a text system where we can provide that. Some of our paid one, the district requires us to use Microsoft Teams, but if you already have Zoom and that's your modality, then stick with that. Toonly is another one that we use because the videos work really well with elementary and middle school students. I'll let you take a look at that in just a second. I'll try to get through this really quick. So creativity during COVID-19. What does the student support look like? Let me see. And please tell me if you can't hear this. You can't hear it? Okay, I must have forgot to, I'm sorry guys. You can go back and listen to it. I'll drop the link. I must have forgot to put the option to play sound, and I won't go back to it though. So let me move then. So I'll make sure I drop the links for you to see the videos, and they're on our website. Everything that's here is on our website, but I'll put the links in the chat after this. I do apologize. I must have see it when I was sharing to share the sound. So the career ready wagon, it's a bus that we outfitted. We actually take this bus to the middle schools, and so I'll make sure to put the video, and if you get a second, go back and look at it so you can see how the bus is outfitted. It's actually outfitted with STEM hands-on tools, so they, an aviation screen, they can actually take a simulation to fly a plane. We have health science on there, we have STEM on there, we have business on there, so we try to rotate those programs of study in and out on the bus. This bus actually goes out to the middle schools within the district, and students can have a field trip at their campus. They get to come on the bus. They get to explore all of the activities. If they want to become a doctor, if they want to be entrepreneurs, if they want to be in agriculture, we have all of that. If they want to do robotics, if they want to do STEM, if they want to fly planes, we have an aviation high school, so they actually do fly planes, gets licensed as pilots. So these hands-on exhibits actually align to our program of study at the high school level. And what we do is introduce the career readiness concepts to the students on this virtual field trip. You won't be able to see the other video, and I do apologize again. So I'll make sure I put the links in. We also have virtual story time. And so every Friday, my team has 2 sessions. There's a link here. You can always look at it and pop in on one of our Friday sessions. So next month, these are the 4 books that they will read on Fridays. And these are geared toward elementary students. And so what they do is read the story, and we have interaction activity, because the reading scores were very low. The reading scores just came out and they were much lower. So we know that the gap is widening, not just a digital divide, but an academic gap. And so it's the pandemic has exacerbated that, and we understand that. And so because we're not direct academic instructors, we provide the support, and we align with academics. So we partner with the curriculum department in our district to see what do we need to do? How do we reinforce these learning skills that the students need at the elementary level? So we target this from K through 5th grade as our virtual story time. So the middle school courses, so we do have 7 courses total that make up the middle school. 5 of those courses allow students to get high school credit. 2 are more exploratory. So we make sure that we try to provide as much opportunities. Again, the pandemic, this was very hard and challenging, but making sure that we stay connected with the teachers of record, making sure that we provide engagement to the best of our ability, opportunities for those students in middle school, grades 6, 7, and 8, to still have the hands-on experience to the best of our ability. And so that probably was more of a challenge to deal with the middle school than any other, but we've had a lot of partners come in. And so United Way, I don't know if I talk about them down the road, but United Way is one of our partners that is really focused on the middle school students and providing those opportunities. So again, they're the newest partner that I'm bringing on, United Airlines, with the pilot. And so that's kind of it in a nutshell with a lot of the things that we are doing here in trying to circumvent going strictly virtual, because students did have an option of if they want to be virtual or not. Here are all of the resources. And I'm pretty sure these are to the videos, but I'll double back and make sure I stick them in the chat. So you can go see Toonly and see the little animated videos. We use those a lot for middle school and elementary. And just to provide opportunities, our YouTube channel and all of that. So with that being said, I will stop sharing, and thank you very much. And if you have any questions, I'm here. I'm sure I shared a lot rather quickly. Thank you. And I'm looking in the chat. So I do see, yes. So the mobile exhibit is, it's probably one of our bigger things. So it's called the Career Ready Wagon. So if you look at the links that I have are the resources that I have, and I think this will be shared, the PowerPoint will be shared with you, but if not, I'll go ahead and drop them throughout the course of this meeting. The Career Ready Wagon actually is booked up the entire school year. So campuses get to request it for their students to come out, and this is how we provide that information for students to explore, because students may not know what they want to do, and we try to expose them to as many opportunities as we possibly can. If they aren't able to go on these field trips, we bring the field trip to them, and so they love it. We have robotics on there. We have everything you can imagine is on that bus. And so as we evolve in blockchain and AI, we're always looking to upskill the bus to make sure that what we put on the bus is relevant to what is going on in the economy.
Dana, I'm wondering if, you know, in many countries of people who have participated in this in the past, especially, you know, there aren't always the resources. You have an incredible wealth of resources in your district. And so I was wondering if there are lessons that you've learned. I know Dr. Hamilton pointed out the partnerships and just also your experience in oil and gas professionally. If there are lessons that can translate to other cultural contexts where maybe those financial resources aren't there, but maybe the partnership possibilities could be. Or I hadn't thought about that mobile exhibit, and I thought that was great because I know the roads are good in Rwanda, and I was thinking this could be something where you can take a potential career to inspire, and even STEM exhibits, because one of the concerns that's been raised in the past here in this forum is that in terms of accessibility during COVID, how do we get information to the children to make sure that they are educated? And so I just wonder if you could highlight maybe a couple of principles that you feel could maybe translate even if the other resources aren't available.
Definitely. And so, for example, the bus is not able to go out right now. So obviously the bus is not going anywhere, but we still have to provide those relevant opportunities, and we're in a virtual space. And so partnership is paramount. A lot of funding came from partners because our budget, even though it's 60 million, you have to think that 60 goes to school build outs. So that goes to building labs at a physical location and covering salaries for the entire district and those kinds of needs. And so when we don't have money to do the things that we want to do, I rely on partnerships and grants. So we write grants in my department. We do have a grant department at the district, but grant money, and there is money out there, and partners are looking to partner. They're trying to justify why they're existing, and they're trying to create their pipeline, because one of the sales that you have when you go to business partnerships, and I learned this, if they want to stay relevant, then they have to understand they have to invest in their labor force, who's going to be their next set of labor. And so if they don't have a full buy-in and they don't have collaboration and partnership with you, then their success hinges on your success. And having all of those stakeholders at the table is very important. And don't be afraid to ask. Every meeting I'm in, and I'm with CEOs all the time, I tell them we do not have money. Right now, we have no money, but we have an event called Career and Military Signing Day, where we highlight the accomplishments of students. And I'm getting it underwriting by business partners. Ask the banks and everybody that you partner with. We have banks because they have started partnering with some of our schools. They built a location on our campus. Well, I need you to provide jobs. I need you to provide opportunity. So the virtual aspect, like the click and chat I saw that you put in there, the click and chat became our lifeline. Even though it started out for PD for the teachers, we had to pivot to create those opportunities for students. And so some of the classrooms where the digital divide, where the students don't have it, we have to create an opportunity. We put a jumbo screen. We got it donated from Merrick, the construction giant, one of the construction giants, and they donated a jumbo screen. And so students who may not have access can come there and stay in an open space and watch all of the things we do from a screen if they don't have those activities. So being able to, I can't say enough about partnership and anything we can do from our end here in America to help you guys. I know we have one of my counterparts, he oversees our global partnership. So right now we're doing a lot with Brazil and South America, but definitely we will pivot to help Africa in any shape, form, or fashion of how we do this engagement virtually. And so my team actually provides those opportunities in our story time, even though we don't have the hands-on robotics or that the whole career ready wagon bus that goes out, we do it in virtual business. So we have partners come in and provide those opportunities online. We partner with a company called coding.org. Reach out to coding.org. I will share my depth of business partnerships. So those that are in Africa, you tap them. Those and I'll ask them, and when we have our council meeting next month, then I'll ask them, hey, how many of you have a footprint in these countries? And so this is what we're doing. And so what I have is an ability to leverage, and I'm more than willing to lend my leverage to you all to say, hey, these are some of our newer partners, and we're looking to do that. The consulate is another one. And so the consulate that is here in America, and if you have that here, that's another partnership. So we deal a lot with consulates just because of the sheer size of HISD in Texas. We kind of have that ability to do those things. And where you don't have the finances, ask your business partners. If you're creating the next generation of labor force, they cannot afford not to partner with you. They can't. Their business won't thrive. So I hope that helped. But
that's
whatever
very helpful. Yes. And your offering and generosity is so evident. So can we just thank Dana?
Let me just ask a quick question. Can I? Yeah. Just a quick one.
Yes, very quick, and then we will move to Sala.
Thank you so much, Dana, for that very rigorous and practical progress and the skills you're offering to the students. I was just wondering, I know the COVID has brought so much of dynamics, and your program is a very hands-on program on competency skills. So I just wanted to know, how do you do the assessment to ensure that, yes, they have the hands-on skills and they are ready and they can go and practice in their careers? So how do you follow up with the assessment to ensure that the students are ready and they have these competency skills, especially now when everything is almost virtual?
So we have no options, Dorcas, because of accountability measure. Our accountability hinges on the ability for those students to either obtain an industry certification. So we have a list of industry certifications, and I'll put them in the chat. I'll give you all my links. And the state requires that. So our funding is tied to a lot of that. Students have to come in. So those who do like Adobe and graphic design and things of that nature, obviously their certifications can be done virtually. But those that require hands-on, they have to come in. It's a non-negotiable. So that means if we have to set up shop wherever we have to, with our secondary partners for welding, they have to come in and weld. You can't tell me you can weld and I can't see you weld. So they physically have to come in. If it has to be on a Saturday, teachers have to avail themselves Saturday or whatever day after school for the students to be able to come in and perform that. For automotive, they have to show the skill set. They can't just, it's not, the assessment has to be done physically. And so those things that we could do virtually, we did do virtually. Those that we cannot do virtually, it was a non-negotiable. It was either they did it or they didn't pass. And that was a hard pill, but we had the hard conversation up front with parents and students. If they needed to change programs of study, they needed to do it immediately, but we could not, because we couldn't risk them going out and not having the skill set necessary. If you can't weld, then you can't be a welder.
Thank you so much. And again, if you think of more questions, please put them into the form. But go ahead, Ruth.
Oh, did we put the form out for people?
Yes, I put that in the group.
Sweet, thank you. So we are going to, Mr. Sala, are you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Awesome, thank you. Are you going to, do you want us to share your slides, or are you going to share it?
He's going to do it, Ruth. He's going to do it.
Okay, wonderful, thank you.
Let me share from my end here. Good afternoon, everybody.
Let me introduce you, Mr. Sala.
Okay, thank you.
So Mr. Sala is an education officer with the Federal Ministry of Education, Abuja, Nigeria. He's involved in accelerating nutrition results in Nigeria, a World Bank project, Junior Achievement, which is a nonprofit, and Safe School Project, which is also a nonprofit. I'm really grateful for Mr. Sala, because as I was searching for somebody in Africa, in the Ministry of Education, I just keep hitting roadblocks. And last minute, Mr. Sala was like, I'll do it. And he was really excited. He was on it. He was communicating. And I'm really grateful for you and really excited to hear what you have to share. Thank you, thank you, thank you for coming and joining us. Over to you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Ruth. I really appreciate. And a very good afternoon to everybody from my end here. Okay, once again, good afternoon, everybody from my end here, regardless of the time zone we are. Well, I want to speak on the impact of the pandemic and future strategies and how it affects Nigeria here. So let me start by just giving a little brief about the pandemic and how it affected the education system. So as you can see on the slide, the Nigerian education system is largely built around the traditional pedagogical learning, which is more focused on the physical learning environment. However, the outbreak of the COVID-19 has revealed the inadequacy in this mode of education. The pandemic on its own has greatly impacted negatively in the education system in the following ways: disruption of the academic calendars in the school, the implementation of government policies on education, disrupted the coordination of internal and external examinations. It affected the access to quality education. And the activities the government took through the Federal Ministry of Education in Nigeria, I categorize them into three groups. During the pandemic, schools were closed down in order to reduce the spread of the virus. Secondly, there was temporary virtual learning via radio, television, and other devices. And we got to understand that some of the private schools in Nigeria had also engaged their students through virtual learning. And as usual, the government on its own part made every effort to make sure the students and likewise every learner were reached. And they campaigned to encourage virtual learning. And the second group, which is the recovery period. During this period, supply of more replaceable dilapidated wash facilities, that is water, sanitation, and hygiene facilities, were replaced and made more functional. There was support and training for teachers on the use of virtual learning devices. C, the government through its agency ensure that the learners and teachers comply with the safety measures, such as wearing of face masks, social distances, and adjustment to the curriculum and calendar to fit in with the new period. And 5, school rehabilitation of classroom to decongest the population of students in the class in order to ensure social distancing. The media campaign for back to school, because at this point there was this fear of some parents releasing their children to go back to school. And also there was also measures by the government to inform parents that the schools were ready to accept the students back, and all necessary measures were put in place. There was also continuous, because even before the pandemic came, the government was engaged in a school feeding program. This was done to encourage people to come to school. And during the pandemic, the government still went ahead, even when the schools were locked down. And after when school were reopened, the school feeding continued. And also there was effective counseling and assembly talk to learners on the new normal, because in Nigeria precisely, the pandemic, COVID-19, it was strange to us compared to the Ebola virus. The new normal, which is the wearing of masks, face masks, and I think there was this regular assembly talk and counseling given to students and teachers that this is just the new things that have come in order to prevent one from contracting the virus. Awareness campaigns, sensitization to parents and learners on the safe return to school via SMS and social medias, the television, the radio. And the third group, which is the post-pandemic era, which is what we are in now. despite there is still the spread. The first one, there's a continuous capacity building workshop for teachers on the appreciation and application of virtual learning method. Second, technical support was given to schools, such as upgrading of ICT centers, provision of virtual learning materials to students, etc. Availability of funds for research purposes. Fourth, that is D, provision of functional water, sanitation, and hygiene facilities, effective monitoring and evaluation mechanism to ensure compliance to the safety guidelines in school. And survey was also carried out for the purpose of knowing the number of learners who have returned to school, because as at the early period when the schools were open, not every student came back to school. So the survey was carried out to see those that have returned in order for the government through the Ministry of Education to encourage and give counseling and sensitization to these parents to allow their children or wards to come back to school. Psychosocial supports was also given to teachers and the learners. Free vaccination to learners and teachers in batches. Though Nigeria as a whole will receive the vaccination in batches. When it first arrived, the elderly people were given, but now those who are interested are enjoined to show their willingness to accept the vaccine to be vaccinated. And in addition to that, the government still, till today, is still making talks through the media for people to accept this vaccine. And awareness sensitization to parents and teachers on the safe learning environment in schools. And the lessons learned, I itemize them here. Well, we've learned that there's always need for school to get prepared for outbreak of virus. We never expected, nobody expected the outbreak of this COVID-19. But through this thing, we've now come to realize that there is always need to be proactive for any unforeseen circumstances. Secondly, there's need for more and effective collaboration with the health sector. Like as it is now, the Ministry of Health on its own role is ensuring that schools are well equipped, the school clinics are well equipped in case of any emergencies. The third, the need to promote and sensitize school children on the importance of water, sanitation, and hygiene. Then we discovered the inadequacy of these wash facilities in school, but the government has really worked on that, because before the COVID-19, people merely overlooked the importance of wash in school. Then we learned that there's always the need to train and continue training of teachers on the use of the current ICT device, because we've come to realize that technology is never static. It moves. You're having one device today, before you know, in the next few months, there's always an upgrade. So I think the government have come to realize that there is need for continuous training of teachers on ICT devices. Need for effective monitoring and evaluation mechanism in schools. Before now, the monitoring wasn't really effective, but with this outbreak of pandemic, we've come to realize that there is need for effective reporting. The need for research and funding and implementation of findings. More funds are made available for researchers, and also the government has taken it serious that every findings from any research will be seriously looked into. Need for more effective collaboration with security agencies to maintain law and orders. Yes, it could be recalled in Nigeria, there was an ugly scene that took place some time ago. Although some people, the fight was just, but it wasn't really taken the right way. But with the way it went, the government has come to realize that the idle mind is the devil's workshop. During that period, some schools were vandalized. So when such outbreak comes, the government has realized through the federal ministry that there's need to place every security to secure properties in these schools. And education, the pandemic, and virtual learning. Nigeria, before now, the virtual learning wasn't really implemented, even though the Federal Ministry of Education has made traffic effort to ensure that virtual learning it becomes a norm in the society. Before, it was just few schools, especially the Federal Unity Colleges, which is directly under the monitoring of the Federal Ministry of Education. It was implemented there. And the federal government on its own had a guideline for policy guideline on ICT in schools. Virtual learning has become imperative in promoting and sustaining educational development globally, considering the disruption effect of the COVID-19 pandemic in the traditional learning. However, the closure of schools has once again highlighted the huge divide between the educational system in developed economies compared to developing economies like Nigeria. In Nigeria, all schools across all levels have been suspended for over 3 months, and educational institutions in the country is finding it difficult to adopt digital education. Challenges of virtual learning in Nigeria. First, electric supply, which some level Nigeria, the federal government has made every effort. The Nigerian government has made every effort to ensure lights get to the rural areas because that is where the deficit is. The secondly, the internet constraints, where presently another closely linked constraint is poor internet connectivity, and in some localities there is no GSM connection, not to talk of internet connection. Online learning often requires a good and strong connection, both for the educator and the learner. Hence, the low level of bandwidth connection is a fundamental limitation. 3, economic constraint. The cost implication of virtual learning is another barrier to the effective implementation of the mode of education. A high percentage of Nigeria live below the normal national poverty threshold per annum. This suggests that the average Nigerian household cannot afford the financial requirement of virtual learning in terms of technology tools like laptops, iPad, internet, enhanced mobile phones, and data expenses. 4, inadequate or lack of knowledge on virtual learning. The level of awareness about virtual learning process is very low, and at some instances, people have no idea what virtual learning is all about. And these are the strategies which the federal government has employed. And I categorize them into 2. The actual strategies. The federal government, through the Federal Ministry of Education, in collaboration with its agencies, sorry, there are some errors here. The federal government, through the Federal Ministry of Education, in collaboration with its agencies, development partners, implemented activities such as this should be implementation of ICT policies in education. B, provision of water, sanitation, and hygiene facilities in schools, and sanitization to teachers and learners. C, capacity building for teachers and learners on virtual learning. D, identifying and providing ICT centers in schools with full internet facilities where there is none. The second group is scale-up strategies. This involves the upgrading of existing facilities in schools to promote virtual learning, such as equipping of ICT centers in schools, training and retraining of teachers and learners on ICT for virtual learning, funding researchers, making digital learning devices affordable, in some cases free to learners, building more classrooms to decongest the present world. And the way forward, 1, improve access and funding of educational sector. 2, access to better electricity supply and internet connectivity. 3, continuous capacity building for educators and students. 4, curriculum reform with emphasis on virtual learning. 5, upgrade and provision of more ICT and internet centers in schools. 6, full implementation of the ICT policy on education. 7, subsidization of educational learning devices such as tablets, phones, computers, etc. 8, sensitization of students, parents, and teachers on the importance of ICT and virtual learning. 9, more free-to-air learning programs on education via radios and television. 10, effective collaboration with the health sector. 11, exchange programs and study tour for experience sharing. And 12, sensitization on distance learning programs. Thank you. For more information, the website is there at the Federal Ministry of Education website. Thank you all.
Thank you so much, Salah. We are so appreciative of, as Dr. Hamilton said, this grounded, just the reality of, especially with the population that you have.
Yes.
I know there are 2 questions on the sheet. Does anyone else have a question that they would just like to pose prior to ours? Let me look at the questions. I'm wondering if you can speak on the list of 4 priorities. Is there a general sense of priority in how to approach the challenges that was posed by Dr. Hamilton?
Okay. So I think the priority in Nigeria is the creation of sensitization on the importance of digital learning. That is through ICT. As to equip the students for virtual learning. And presently, that is one of the greatest challenges. Just as you said, the population in Nigeria is great, and the government on its own is trying its effort to ensure that every student has a device to study with.
I'm curious, you just mentioned the government on its own, and then I'm thinking of Dana's presentation and wondering where you are seeking partnerships or what partnerships have been successful that might, be a good example in other countries.
Okay, I think capacity building for teachers is one of the places I will want to seek partnership. Capacity building for teachers, especially in the use of ICT devices for virtual learning. Because in Nigeria, people tend to look more at the urban areas, the developed areas, ignoring the rural areas. And you may be surprised that there are some teachers in the rural areas that just have a phone, but all they do with the phone is to make calls, receive calls, and nothing more. So I think there's need to develop their capacity. Thank you.
I see Isaac just posted, what are the prospects of a solution for the age-old problem of unreliable electricity supply in Nigeria? And then after that question, again, please feel free to post more questions and we can continue after the forum, but then we want to allow time for Dr. Hughes is going to be speaking with us.
Okay. Concerning electricity supply in Nigeria, the government on its own part, through the Ministry of Power, the present government has really made effort to make sure there's this program they have, the Rural Electricity Program, is to ensure that electricity gets to the rural area. But alternatively, and as the world is going, we are now looking into renewable power, which is basically solar. because I can bet you there are some schools in the rural areas that don't even have electric wire connection, talk more of wire. So those solar devices can go a long way to help in it, because the light, the electric, the national grid is finding difficult to even produce for everybody. Talk more of the rural area. So we are now looking, there's a way the solar devices can be provided to really go a long way. Thank you.
Sorry, I forgot to unmute. Thank you so much for all this great information, Dr. Salah. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. And I'm sure we're going to have more. I'm going to talk to you more, and we'll probably follow up with you more on other things.
Okay, thank you very much.
All right, now we are going to have Dr. Hughes. And Dr. Conrad Hughes holds an MA, EDD, PhD. So lots of knowledge here. So let's leverage it. He is the campus and secondary school principal at the International School of Geneva, the oldest international school in the world. He has been school principal, director of education, international baccalaureate diploma program coordinator, and teacher in schools in Switzerland, France, India, and the Netherlands. Conrad is also a member of the advisory board of the University of the Peoples, or of the People, senior fellow of UNESCO International Bureau of Education and research assistant at the University of Geneva Department of Psychology and Education. He also teaches philosophy. So Dr. Conrad, thank you so much for giving us your precious knowledge and your time. Please take it away.
Thank you very much for having me here, Ruth. Dr. Hamilton, you maybe forgot to say the most important bit, which is I'm a South African.
That's right. I said that earlier.
Oh, you did. Sorry. So I mean, I'm an African. I might not look like an African, but I am, and I'm actually very proud of my country. I have this theory which comes from the French sociologist Ernst Renan, that all this talk about global citizenship and looking for macro systems, it's sometimes moving away from what really makes us human, which is what's happening around us. So I'm uprooted from my country, but I'm connected in spirit and in soul. My brother runs a school in Cape Town. I run a school in Geneva, so it's a very different environment. What I'm going to talk to you about today is innovation, some reflections on innovation, and a little bit of storytelling about the way that we're innovating at the International School of Geneva. And I'm going to speak for about 12 minutes. So what I'd like to propose is first just to ask ourselves some simple questions about innovation. You know, why do we innovate? What exactly should we be innovating, and how? And those three questions, the why, the what, and the how, will really structure this short talk. So innovate, where does that come from? Well, you've got at the root of it novus, this Latin word for new. And therefore the idea that we need to do something new. And straight away, I think we're in a quite a culturally specific and historically specific way of looking at the world, with this frenzy that I would label positivistic, to change, to do something differently. And along with that discourse is a whole worldview that, you know, what's important is the future. We need to improve things. The youth, you know, hold the key to everything. And, you know, people who think that education is about cultural transmission, about the wisdom of the elders, about hanging on to tradition, well, you know, they kind of has been, they're of another world, and we don't really want to talk about that too much. You know, let's all get excited about the future instead. And then, of course, we add to that very quickly that the world's in a state of absolute, you know, catastrophe and disaster. And, you know, we've really got to fix things quickly, and by going to generation, and so on and so forth. So this is very much a dominant discourse. But I think it's always good to stand back from discourses and deconstruct them a little bit, especially if we're looking at things from an African perspective. And I don't need to tell you on the call, because you're Africans, that elders, wisdom, ancestry are incredibly valuable. And this idea that we need to uproot things and we're in some sort of hurry to move ahead is not necessarily always going to be the wisest or the best. So just a thought there. Nonetheless, it would be difficult to do conference talks or to have anything of any interest to say in education if you're not looking to change a few things. I mean, you can't very well walk around saying, well, I don't want to change anything. I mean, no one would really want to listen to you. And there are some things that we really should think about changing. There's no shortage of data on the problems in the world, socioeconomic, clearly environmental. We're all living through COVID. I'll spare you one of those pitches because you've probably heard it more than enough. But I would say that there are two essential lenses to look at innovation. One is empirical and the other is normative. So empirical is this idea that we describe what's around us, and that forms our philosophy. It's based on observation of trends and phenomena that are occurring around us. Normative, on the other hand, it's not what is, it's what should be. And I would argue that a lot of the discourses on innovation today are too empirical and not sufficiently normative. Let me explain. First of all, they don't come from educational voices. They come from industry, from the corporate sector. So it's all about technology. It's about skills for the workplace. It's about getting ready for the jobs that are going to exist in the future. And increasingly, educators are looking at places like the World Economic Forum, the OECD, the McKinsey Group, or even going straight to, Bill Gates for answers. What about all these people who've, studied education and are sort of teaching, and what about them? I think that there's a bit of a bandwagon to jump onto change because change is what has to happen. And that discourse is obviously being accelerated for various reasons, COVID one of them. Now, the problem with this empirical view is that it doesn't really have any philosophy behind it. It's sort of patched together by various sound bites and conference keynotes and white papers and diagrams, frameworks. I mean, I don't know how many frameworks there are out there anymore. I've got a theory that we probably invent one per conference. And there's something of a cacophony, which leads us to the normative. Now, the normative is, why don't we just sort of forget about what's happening around us and do some blue sky thinking and think, what do we really want? What would the perfect school look like? What would the perfect learning pathway look like? We don't need to jump onto all of these bandwagons to answer those questions. And I think that if we start that way, we'll get a much richer discussion moving forward. I have a contention that there's quite a lot of change for the sake of change. And there's also a suspicion of not changing that is not actually grounded in any deep thought. That's why at my school, the first thing we did when we decided to review our curriculum was to decide which framework we were going to look at and why. So we chose UNESCO and the International Bureau of Education because for UNESCO's International Bureau of Education, curriculum is about social transformation. It's about goods, individual good, collective good, public good. It's even about social justice. Now, these are some of the terms that are being used hurriedly today as part of this sort of change bandwagon, which gets fueled by the media, mainly social media. But the thinking has to be done on the ground by leaders, by schools, by boards, by teachers. What do we want? You don't need a consultant to help you do that. And you don't need to look at what everybody else is doing. Clearly, you will seek best practice. And, you know, no one's an island. But it's so important to start with that coaching question. You know, what do I want? So the why is actually quite critical. I think that if you probe some of the movements towards innovation, the response tends to be a pre-baked idea that's come from somewhere else. But each institution needs to have its own why. And our why at my school, why did we want to change things, was because of an education system that we feel is not actually assessing what it should be assessing. So this leads me now to the second point, which is what should we be changing? We need to be changing assessment. Curriculum should drive assessment. Right now, we're in a world where assessment drives curriculum. Let me explain. When you're in primary school, or even middle school, or lower secondary school, there's probably quite a lot of creative thinking, genuine innovation. Students get to breathe. They get to doodle. They get to play. I mean, in primary school, they even get to take naps. But as you get to the upper secondary, there's this crushing pressure to perform on exams, which perverts the whole system. And all of a sudden, teachers are teaching to the test. Things like internal assessments or coursework are no longer snapshots of what a student can actually do, but they're a chance to improve your grade. And that essentially corrupt system makes its way all the way into university admissions protocols. I mean, you've heard of the varsity blues scandal. I mean, the whole thing seems to have just sort of gone off the plot. It doesn't really help to have PISA scores out there and all of these metrics on performance. All of those things need to come naturally out of a curriculum that is designed for the sake of the curriculum. So paradoxically, what we need to change, it's not the curriculum, it's the assessment, because the assessment, unfortunately, is what drives everything. And right now we're in a world where everyone's talking about 21st century skills, and then they're doing 19th century skills at the end of school. So we've created a garage, which is our students' brains, where we're dumping old things and new things at the same time, and then just actually testing them on the old things. So what we've done in my school is we've said, let's change high school transcripts. You know, this piece of paper that students take with them to universities. And let's say it's not just about grades. We want it to be about more than that. And it's not like any of this is actually new. Portfolio systems, a chance for students to show who they are, giving a little bit of ownership to the students, assessing competences that are not purely academic. Lots of schools are not only thinking about this today, but have been thinking about this for a long time. But it's time to do something about it. So we have a competence-based approach. We have designed a passport system that catches 7 competences that we think are important. Lifelong learning, self-agency, interacting with the world, interacting with others, interacting with diverse tools and resources, transdisciplinarity, and multi-literateness, not literacy, literateness, literate, the perfective, as in learnt with a T, or burnt with a T, which is perhaps not the kind of imagery we want to be evoking right now. But the idea is we do want students to be pretty good at a few things. So those 7 credit areas are being used not only to capture academic performance, but non-academic performance too. We've designed a system that allows students to bring into school things that they're doing outside of school. If you look at your students, many of the competences they're developing are not actually in school, and we don't know about them. So that's what we need to change. We need to have a more serene, inclusive high school transcript system. And all sorts of things will come from that. It'll be more diverse, and inclusive, because literacy and numeracy are essentially predictors of socioeconomic background. A lot of studies have shown, it's obvious, that educated parents, middle class to upper class parents, you know, they talk about politics and things like that at the dinner table. There's an elaborate code at home, and that accelerates those learners, and it becomes a kind of virtuous cycle. There's children from poorer backgrounds, they don't get that kind of background advantage. So testing them on literacy is actually quite an exclusive practice. I'm not saying literacy is not important, but using that as a benchmark to determine their future success. And numeracy, you think numeracy because it's not something you talk about at home. It's a sort of, it's an intellectual skill that really needs to be wrought at school. You'd think that that wouldn't have any advantage socioeconomically, but it does, because parents from middle to upper class backgrounds tend to have more confidence in the numeracy ability of their children than parents from lower class backgrounds. There's more of a sort of fatalistic approach. And that has a significant effect on performances. So, you know, numeracy and literacy are important, but what about the way you interact with people? What about all these students who are doing startups, who are creating things, who are doing community work, who are incredible at athletics and in the arts? Let's let them tell their story too, as part of this new transcript. So that's what we're doing at my school. It's called the Learner Passport. And it comes from our program called the Universal Learner Program, which is all about competences. But to come back to the beginning of my talk, the reason why we're doing a competence-based education is not because everyone else is, or more and more people are saying this is what's necessary. It's because we did some soul searching and we built this project together as a school. I think that's important because it gives you the energy and the authenticity behind your vision to innovate deeply and for the right reasons. So that's sort of what I'd like to share with you. And what I'm going to do is put in the chat just a couple of articles that reinforce the message, so if you like. The first one is on our program, the Universal Learner Program, and the normative vision behind it from UNESCO's International Bureau of Education. So you can have a look at that if you're interested. The second one is something that I wrote quite recently with the conversation. It's on why we need to change assessment. And it also introduces a coalition of schools that are working together to design a new type of transcript. And the third one from the World Economic Forum is something I wrote on the whole kind of problem of schools today and why this is what we need to innovate: assessment. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Hughes. Can we just give him a round of applause? I'm actually headed into a town meeting here in New England around education, and was so struck by the frameworks which you were talking about and the notion of just empirical versus normative. And we are so missing the why in so many of our questions and the ways in which we're even allocating resources. So thank you for that. Mike Mumbo, we're just going to take a couple of questions and then we have one more speaker. And Mike, you just wrote, it's unfortunate that we're using 19th century assessment on the 21st century skills. How is your school coping with this? You touched on some of that, but if you want to elaborate further. And then again, if you want to post your questions into the working document, we'll look at some of those as well.
Well, we have something called a character project, where students set themselves personal goals in a social, a physical, and an intellectual domain, and they sort of track their own progress. We have a project, and they have to do this project. We have a project called the Passion Project, where they bring something that they love into the school, and they design a project that has some sort of social benefit, social impact through this passion of theirs. That's to teach them to connect what they love with what they do, because hopefully, you know, self-agency, decision-making. We have something called a Mastery Project, where students look at the relationships between different factors in the social sciences, and they use some mathematical analysis, essentially statistics, to look at those correlations. So what's the relationship between, I don't know, GDP and happiness, or between, you know, pollution and productivity? That's for them to reflect a little bit on the sort of the impact of knowledge. Every service has to do service, every student has to do service learning. That's learning to serve and serving to learn. So that's part of our formal assessment. But we have a problem, which is right at the end of everything. They do the IB diploma, the International Baccalaureate Diploma, which we actually invented in my school in 1968. We think it's a fantastic program, but it's still very exam-based. It's very, very high stakes. And so we're looking to, not to reform the IB, but to say that universities and post-secondary institutions need to look at more than just performance on these exam boards. They need to make just a little space for students to bring who they are. So that's what we're reforming right now. We're creating this passport. We're working with a group called the Mastery Transcript Consortium in the States. That's the platform we're using. So students are allowed to have feature on their high school diplomas, all sorts of things that aren't actually on the curriculum. But we're stamping the quality of those with a credit system. So it's complex, but we think it's necessary to include more students in the journey. And also to tell them that, you know, school's not just a place where adults are telling you what to do all the time. You're allowed to actually innovate, since we're talking about innovation, yourselves, and bring some of what you do to the table.
Thank you. I'm just going to look at, we have a question from Dorcas. Competency education is very practical, relevant, and drives more understanding to students. How do you balance the expense that comes with very practical competency skills and affordability of the program curriculum?
I don't believe any of this needs money. You know, this is about attitude and belief. One of the things that we've done is created a system where every student sees her or his or their mentor, who's a teacher coach, for a one-on-one at least twice a year. And the discussion is very simple. It's, how are you? You know, how is everything? And kind of tell me, you know, who you are, what your dream is. Kind of just getting them to loosen up a little bit. Because conversations are always transactional, and they're around assessments and learning. You know, we even talk about students as learners. I mean, come on, they're human beings. They're not machines, right? And that doesn't cost money. That's part of this work on character. You know, designing a system where students can stamp what they do with some of their own work. I don't believe that there are financial barriers there. There are barriers. And the barriers are this forceful system that's pushed down on us that isn't really controlled by anyone. No one wants to change a plane while it's flying. And it's very difficult to get thousands of institutions to talk to one another. I mean, just getting European universities to agree on a transferability of the undergraduate programs, which is called the Bologna Agreement, that took forever. And if I'm not mistaken, I'm not even sure that's been done properly in the United States, you know, one country. So that's the challenge. It's that I think if you isolate all of these educational institutions, they're very forward-looking. But when they come together in this massified structure, you wind up with something which we all know isn't really working. Now that's the problem. And in some ways it is working as well. You know, we have to be nuanced. But overall, I think there's a problem. And you know, with COVID, I mean, we saw what happened with COVID. The whole system came crashing down. This examination board with its human resource overhead, it can't resist disruption. And all of a sudden, people were scrapping around for evidence of student learning. And because they hadn't developed something like a passport, or they didn't have some sort of portfolio system, you know, these bizarre algorithms were being cooked up, and we're using predictive data, and, you know, it was all over the place. And that created a huge amount of anxiety. And we're never really going to get away from that, because it's so tightly strung and fraught that this year's university acceptances have been narrowed because of last year's COVID fallout. And that's going to spill over into next year. I mean, the whole thing is just crazy. So We have to be more mindful. I think there has to be more trust as well. Because, you know, by saying, well, you teach the kids at school, but then we're going to create another exam because we don't really believe if you tell them that they're good, that they are good. We want to see ourselves. That's not sustainable. It is sustainable if what you want is a highly elitist system.
That's a good comment. I want to get to Mary's question, then we're going to have to move on. We have one more speaker. Again, we've moved a 2-day form into 1 day, so we're tweaking some things, but there's so many rich questions that are starting, I think, as people are getting more comfortable. So I want to just hit Mary's question. How do we prepare teachers to leverage what students are bringing into the class from home to enhance learning? And then we'll end with that question and move on to Elizabeth. So thank you.
I think there are 2 ways you can do it. One is, as an institution, design some kind of project that allows that to happen. And that's a fantastic way of doing it. You can have an exhibition, you can get the parents involved, everybody celebrates what everybody else does, great. If that's not possible, then do it in your classroom. Adapt your criteria. I mean, we can adapt assessment basically all the way up until the last 2 years. And unless maybe you're doing some sort of benchmark assessments earlier down, it's true that that might not be the case. But I think teachers have a lot of power and agency to really do that kind of thing. And I think a lot of it probably does happen, you know, naturally. Bringing a student's voice in. Now, it's easy for me because I teach philosophy. And, you know, it's a terrific subject because it's almost impossible not to discuss important, meaningful things in life if you're doing philosophy, right? Might be a bit more tricky with other subject areas, with a bit of imagination and maybe thinking carefully about the competences that you're assessing. You can get there. Some of the competences we're actually assessing in reports, you know, formally. It's things like balancing rights with responsibilities, accountability, curiosity, fellowship. Why not? I mean, we all say these things are important, right? So if the system can't do anything about it, then why don't we do that in our classrooms? Just here and there, you know, a few little projects, tasks, pieces of assessment, learning experiences. What I can't stand is when there's this idea that, oh, no, I can't do that because I've got to get through the curriculum and the test. No, you know. It's like, okay, so let's just, you know, let's just plow through the stuff. Why? Because, well, you know, we have to prepare them for the exams and that's it. And that goes on for about 30,000 hours. Well, that's an exaggeration because it's more narrow towards the end of secondary.
Thank you. Can we just once again, such wisdom. So thank you so much, Dr. Hughes. And Ruth is going to introduce our final panelists, but I'm just finding it interesting as each of you has shared, you know, Dana, bringing your oil and gas hat, you know, kind of that experience that's impacted how you are doing education, and the philosophical lens of Dr. Hughes and the government lens. Like, all of these perspectives are so important, and we wouldn't hear them if we didn't, you know, take time to hear from those different from us. So I just really appreciate all those different lenses and how that's impacting. Take it away, Ruth.
Thank you so much, Dr. Hughes. I think we will probably need to have you come back. Thank you so much. Now I'm going to introduce Dr. Elizabeth. Dr. Elizabeth Ngololo is the Senior Research Fellow, multidisciplinary research at the Multidisciplinary Research Center at the University of Namibia, which is the largest, higher education institute in the nation, with over 30,000 students from 41 countries globally. Her dissertation was in computer integrated education, and the title was An Evaluation of the ICT Policy for Education Implementation in Namibia Rural Schools. Dr. Ngololo, thank you so much for accepting to talk to us about your take on the pandemic as far as the nation and over Africa is concerned. The one thing I really like about Dr. Ngololo is she's so humble. She's so humble. Even when I was like, can you give me your bio? I was like, give it to me. I had to go dig. But she's really humble, and I appreciate that about her so much. Not that if you don't give me your bio, if you give me your bio, you're proud. That's not what I'm saying. I'm literally just saying, from my take, I've never really met her in person, but from online meetings that we've had, I get this vibe. She's very humble and very giving, and I'm very grateful to have her here today. Take it over.
Thank you, Ruth, and good to see all of you. Okay, first of all, when I received the invitation, a lot of things were running through my mind as to what I should be talking about. And Namibia being a very large country in terms of size, but the population is very, very small. We are about less than 2.5 million people. And we do have so many challenges, actually. And as Salah Bisala was presenting, I thought Nigeria is in Namibia because we share similar problems. But then I also think that we are perhaps doing something for our country, for our children, but questions such as, are we doing enough? Do we have the right resources? Are we doing what is right? And are we benchmarking with international standards? So those are some of the questions that were running through my mind. And I'm just gonna share with you some of the issues on curriculum, on ICT infrastructural development, and the general issues that the Namibia is faced with in terms of educational challenges. I'm going to talk to you about the greater impact of the pandemic in Namibia and in Africa at large. And I'm glad Salah has talked what is happening in Nigeria, which is similar to what is also happening in Namibia. As I said, we are a small nation, and we do have over 3,000 cases. That to us is quite a large number. Cases 48,000 to us is something big, and it's costing government a lot of money. And however, we also had deaths of over 500,000. The next slide. But what is worrisome is, in terms of the education system in Namibia here, is if you look on the left-hand side, we have a picture of a typical village. And most people live in rural areas in Namibia. I'm talking about half the population of Namibia lives in rural areas. And this is the setup of a typical school in rural areas. Of course, we do have those that are made out of bricks, but you still find many of these type of schools. And we are envisioning or dreaming for education 4.0 or 5.0. Is it really doable? We got our independence in 1990. It's been 31 years, and we still have schools of that nature. And if you look on the right-hand side, this is the type of school. This I got from, is a school in Rwanda, and they do have a policy of one child, one laptop. Each child should have a laptop, at least to sort of get the learning going. Now, when do we, as Namibians, get to the point of where Rwanda is? And I'm sure I'm speaking of many other African countries that are facing the similar situation. Is it doable? Is it reality? Are our national resources prioritized towards achieving an equal education and equitable education for all? These are some of the questions that are, and when actually do we upgrade our infrastructures so that we are on par with other international other nations. And the issue is, like Conrad spoke, these students who sit in classes like this, made of sticks, are assessed similarly to those that are in towns. And how do we expect the majority of the people to, or the majority of the learners to get to institutions of higher learning if they are being taught in these kinds of environment where there are no resources or few resources? Or is it for us to think about indigenizing the curriculum, decolonizing the curriculum such that we use the immediate materials that we have around us? But the question is, are these also appropriate? Do these also suit our curriculum in terms of the types of topics or themes that we have to teach them? Next slide. Now, like most African countries, I believe, we were caught in a situation where we were unprepared for anything, I would say. Both the students, the teachers, we didn't know what to do. For a long time, we aired radio programs to our students, TV programs to our students, but is this the type of education that we wanted? Was it perhaps, we were in a situation, but did we deliver to the best of our ability? Now, in this case, as we are delivering, we're also contemplating what is the best mode of delivery. Proper research was done in terms of identifying what is best, because we have different situations, rural areas, urban areas, learners with special needs, and so on and so forth. So during my research, I discovered that in most countries, all of us, most institutions, I would say, used electronic platforms. But then the most preferred was WhatsApp, because it's on the mobile phone. Most likely 70% of the students would have mobile phones. And the Zoom, yes, here and there, but the most preferred was WhatsApp by the students. And the other issue was the cost of internet packages are too high, even now. And also slow internet connectivity, the compatibility of mobile phones to the available platforms that are given by the institutions. So those were some of the challenges that the students, as well as us, the lecturers, were facing, and teachers too. In many cases, what happened was the government ensured that they engaged the print media, printed exercises for learners to do at home. But that, as if it's not enough. Yes, we do get those materials. Parents are working. Some children live with their grandmothers, and the grandmothers had no clue as to what the content is about, what they were expected to do, and most of all, how to help the students. I, for one, struggled to assist my 5-year-old. I didn't have the skills to do that, and it was a struggle. But eventually, I got through it and convinced him that mommy is also a teacher, and mommy can also help. Next slide. Can we have, okay. Now, just as I said, there wasn't interaction between learners and students. We struggled a lot. On the right side, if you look, government tried by all means to put up a platform called MyZone that teachers or curriculum developers could upload the teaching materials, and they could upload some of the teaching materials and also do online assessment. And it served as a database for most of for most of the teaching activities. But just as I said, how many teachers had access to this? How many teachers were actually trained to use it and to use it to the, effectively, I would say. And also, we should think about what is relevant during the pandemic, because our curriculum only gets revised every 5 years. Are we teaching the correct content? Should we be changing it in between, or should we leave it to the teachers to see what is important so that they can teach whatever they think is relevant at the time, given the digital divide between rural and urban areas? So those are some of the challenges. And also it kept me thinking whether we are actually adopting the right strategies for both teachers and learners. At the university, of course, they emphasize Moodle. Students they don't have data to connect to Moodle. In the absence of Moodle, what do you do as a lecturer? You use WhatsApp. Perhaps WhatsApp or Google Classrooms at the time. And the other challenge we had was the continuing professional development programs. They were not appropriate and timely because of perhaps money, lack of trainers that knew what is best at the time. So we're sort of in a lost world at the moment and trying to find ourselves. But then this is taking time. As we are doing research, we're probably identifying what is best for us. Can we have the next slide? Whatever schools are doing or whatever government institutions are doing are guided by strategies devised by the African Union, the action plan, and NEPAD. But are these just white and blue papers? How far should we go to interpret this so that we as nations take care of our individual needs? And how much money is made available by these international communities to serve in these countries that are in dire need? I can give you an example. Namibia hasn't benefited in terms of vaccine. We are still waiting for the vaccines through the African Union programs. So it makes you wonder whether we as Africa are getting our agendas right, are thinking to educate and to empower our nation. And how do we then articulate these plans? And how do we execute some of these plans for the sustainable development and hybridization? Because already we do have systems existing. If you like, Western knowledge is there. We are talking about indigenous knowledge. How do we hybridize this type of knowledges that exist out there in the best possible way to benefit all? And the other problem that I found is that researchers are working in silos. I work on my educational program and my research activities, and the same research activities another person could benefit from wouldn't know what I'm doing. And therefore, perhaps money is not directed to where it should be. So somehow we need to know who is doing what. And much of the research that I came across as I was preparing for this presentation talks about perceptions and experiences, but less of what are solutions to this in terms of developing devices for teaching and learning. Maybe for those that are in town, also perhaps devices that could be used offline for those who are in the mountains that do not have internet access, it's more about perceptions and experiences and less of applications that the teaching and learning fraternity, effectively. Next slide.
And we realize, okay, we realize we're at the top of the hour, but this is her final slide.
So you can imagine, I'm in town, I'm in Windhoek, the capital city, and I get cut off like that. What more about those in the rural areas? But in any case, what am I on the issues of access, quality education in Africa? We need to identify the kind of science and technology that Africa requires to establish our own agenda and adaptation strategies. I think that would help us a lot. There's a lot being down out there, and we need to search what is more that speaks to us most. And a program should realize the importance of culture and end users in the process of technology design and transfer. I'm sure I speak for other African countries. The user is more important. And as we develop these applications, these devices, we should just think of their culture and what would attract them to be using these devices. And we should be building technologies with specific focus on entrepreneurship for the purpose of upgrading internationalization. Thereby, I mean, in our curriculum, for example, we emphasize the issue of entrepreneurship so that it's sustainable and somehow we can have some revenue of what we are doing. Then by that, if we develop these applications, then they can probably be used by other people, pay a small fee, and teaching and learning can continue in a more sustainable way. And also, whoever is developing the application will be able to either also employ others, and that way we are going to address the poverty issues that we are battling with in Africa. And I thank you. This is where I end.
Thank you so much, Dr. Nholo. That was, again, that grounding of reality and what's really taking place. And honestly, just the experience of your internet being intermittent in the capital city highlights the real challenges. And I'm struck by the comments of most of what you're reading and seeing are the perceptions and saying this is the problem, but less on how do we get access to the students. Ruth, how would you like to, I know there are lots of comments, we've been trying to capture them from the chat. Ruth is saving those comments. Is there maybe one question we can kind of wrap with? I realize it's the top of the hour and Ruth just wanted to make a brief closing.
I don't have much to close with. So if we do have a couple, we could take a couple of questions if people do have questions. Really
Isaac.
Explicit.
Okay, I see. Isaac, what's the level of responsiveness to these problems on the part of the Namibian government? Maybe in the part of actually getting the, not just talking about perceptions, but actually finding solutions. That's from Isaac Quist.
Okay, as I said, I'm based at the University of Namibia. Government has put together a team of researchers to try to find solutions to some of the problems. And the team comprises researchers from the various universities across the country. And they said to us, they'll give us about 2 million Namibian dollars, which is a small amount. But up to date, we have not received any because there are so many issues that I think government has to battle and to prioritize. If you have schools where there is no running water, running water I think is a priority at the moment, and vaccination issues. So resources are being directed to to solve health-related problems, then education. educational problems, such that it will be very difficult for me to rate how much support we are getting from government. Of course, it's trying its best. Now, at the university, just to encourage us to teach and to ensure continuity of teaching and learning, we get internet devices at a cost, $690 Namibian. Students also buy this. And imagine students who come from impoverished communities who are unable to purchase these devices. They will be left out. So yeah, I would say there may be the will, the political will, but the actual support is very minimal, I would say.
So, go ahead, Ruth.
Yes. So any final thoughts from Jennifer or Dr. Hamilton? No final thought, Jennifer? Dr. Hamilton, any final thoughts?
Great. Each of these sessions was so interesting and informative and compelling. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. We are working on putting a website together. We haven't quite decided whether it will be a standalone website or will be attached to my nonprofit or another website. So we're working on that. These resources will be available for all of you on there. But for now, we have links, and all of these resources will go out in an email in about a week or so. Thank you all again for coming. This was a great session. We tried it out and it looks like it works really well. And we're hoping that we can keep it up and we can get the numbers growing and reach more people. One thought that Dr. Ngololo mentioned that stuck to my mind was that we don't have, across Africa, we do not have one place where we can go to find research. I have been trying, she told me about a research and I've been trying, and I reached the school, I tried the school, I keep running all over to find that particular article and I cannot find it. So I have to go back to her for it. I think maybe in the future, maybe somehow we will have to start thinking, maybe there's a genius in the group that knows how to get something like that started to make it easy for researchers to be able to be in one place. But most of us in the house are educators and researchers, and I hope that we can figure this out. Thank you again for coming. Thank you for being a part of this. Together, these ideas, we can change our communities. So let's keep coming. Let's keep sharing our ideas and let's keep learning from each other. Thank you so much. Thank you. See you next time.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for making this happen. It was great learning. Yeah,
thank you, Dorcas.
Great questions, Dorcas. Excited to see you in 2 weeks.
Right.
Yeah.
Person.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.